2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Modeler Mondays. This is the 13th episode in the live stream series Modeler Mondays, every other Monday unless scheduled otherwise at 1 p.m. EST. Oh, sorry. I hiccuped. Modeler Mondays provides tips, tricks, tutorials, and an insight into professional, unique workflows when creating in both VR and on desktop in Adobe Substance 3D Modeler. For those who don't know me, 13 episodes in, you should by now. But hi, I'm Val. You may know me as foxxr on the Discord community and on the internet. And someone who needs no introduction, but we'll do so anyway. We have our special guest, Felipe, here today. We're really excited to have him on. Everyone give him a warm welcome. Felipe, tell us a little bit about who you are.
So hello guys, hello everyone. So my name is Felipe Rojas Otero. I am a Colombian industrial designer. And I am currently working as a half-time interior designer in Volkswagen. And yeah, I am mostly a concept designer all the time. And I like to have fun making cool 3D designs and cool stuff. So yeah, thank you for having me.
No, all good. And we're so excited to have you on today too. So for anyone who's been watching us for a little bit, we do love to go through and go back in terms of what people have been doing, what they like to do in VR modeling and desktop modeling. Tell us a little bit about what you like specifically, Felipe. When we were talking earlier, you were saying that you have like a very 3D mind. Give us some background, like what do you study? What are you doing currently?
Sure, so first I started my studies in Colombia, in my university from my hometown. I started industrial design. First, I was really into making illustrations and really cool graphics all the time. But then a couple of years ago, when I came here to Germany as an exchange student, I have the possibility of discovering a really cool tool that's actually VR, with Gravity Sketch. And when I jumped into the VR, it was like a totally new step. It was totally amazing the way that I was actually able to create stuff right away and feel how the impression was of it. I have made car designs, character designs, also some airplanes and spacecraft. But since 3 years ago, I have always, let's say, into the VR and actually exploring new ways of making and communicating into it, because it is not only about the way of actually building the things in 3D, but also the way you experience them, because it's like if it is there, but it is actually not there, you know? It's like pixels in reality, but like non-existing. So it's actually really cool.
Oh, excellent. And yeah, so you were saying that there are some that you have some strengths in VR as well. And so like talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how did you really get into it? What was your first headset? Like, tell me about that.
So my first headset actually was from my university from Germany, actually from Magdeburg. They were the ones who gave me, and it's actually the camera from here is still the same.
No way.
So I have still used it since 3 years ago. This one is a Vive Pro. It's the most stable one that I have always used. And it is funny because the way I went into VR, it was unexpected, as I said before, because I really had a struggle when I was making the 3D elements of my designs. For me, it was really hard actually to make a really cool 3D element from a 2D view. Like for example, with Blender, with SolidWorks, with Rhinoceros, it was really kind of boring of making the stuff happen and have like a really feeling when you were only seeing in a, let's say, in a picture in a screen. So when I jumped into the VR and I saw that I was able actually to create the stuff right away and feel it that it was there and see from the old dimensions and from the old views, it was really cool for me, and it was much more natural to actually, and it makes sense, you know, it was much more logic to build the stuff this way. I was like, okay, this is much more interesting. It's like playing video games, you know?
Yeah.
So after that, I just was spending a lot of hours, like 3, 4, 6 hours a day, of course having some breaks in between. But yeah, I mean, for me it was really fun just making stuff and having making a mecha of 3 meters of like one building tall, and feeling that like I was the small one inside of the room in this VR world.
That's
so it was really fun.
All right, and so you actually use, like, I would say, VR in your day-to-day design works, or like what else do you do? I hear that you're a pretty good illustrator as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a really good illustrator, but right now I'm really much more into the VR, because for me, I mean, we have seen before illustrations since 5 or 10 years ago, really having a lot of feature everywhere in Instagram, in all the side of design content, and they have a really high level, like in everything, illustration, make it super realistic with these really nice volumes. And when I discovered the VR, for me was kind of, let's say, the next step, you know? It is not about, let's say, representing the design in a way that you can actually feel it, but with the VR, you actually live the design because you actually believe it is there and you can really perceive it as an actual thing that is existing in your world. So I took a little bit step back on the part of illustration that I really enjoy a lot, but it is for me it's like really much more time consuming for only having a nice picture. I don't know. And then I went like full time into the VR, and I found interesting stuff. Like for example, as I have said before, the experience, the way you tell the story, and also the way you show actually the product is not only about making a nice animation and making a looping around, but it is also about creating like a complete story behind it and making people actually make like having emotions inside of this because they are with this headset. And there is, for example, really cool, there is no physics in this world, but you can create really crazy stuff.
That's so cool.
So yeah.
No, and like thank you for sharing with us. I think that it's really cool, and it's obvious that you're so passionate about it too. For those who are watching today, we don't actually have a live demo of Modeler because Felipe has gone through and done some projects, and so we'll really just be going through like a lot of his personal work, the way that his workflow is, what he did for some of these projects, and then also an insight if anybody would like to ask questions around like how he found working with Modeler or even any other different design tools within the Adobe suite or anything to that effect, please toss it in the chat and we'll be sure to get to you during the stream. And so, Felipe, I've got like a running, what is it, PowerPoint of some images that you shared for us about the Adobe Motive project. Yeah, it's like we almost like we planned this.
It is a
Talk to me a little bit about like the Adobe Motive project and like let everybody know what that actually is, just for those who aren't really familiar.
So this project came and it happened because they invited me. I have to, in this case, I really have to thank Cycle that is the one who invited me to this camp. And they told me, hey, we know you are really into the VR. We know that you are really in love with this stuff. And since I also kind of all the time crashed programs and found the bugs in between, they told me for this case, you're perfect for also testing this new software of Adobe and actually see like the strengths and also the weaknesses to make it even more interesting. So I went to Rubica, the university in France, and I started to make all the cool stuff interested and let's say try out to see what actually happened. I didn't have much more info. I only knew it was a cool project about Adobe with a new 3D software in VR. So I was like, okay, hell yeah, why not? It's always cool to find new tools. So I was saying like, it's like, it could be a game changer for me. So why not?
Yeah.
And yeah, at the start we have 1 week testing first the desktop version. So I was kind of getting into it, understanding how it works, what it was actually different from other softwares. And then the second week we actually have full time into the VR. And that's when I was really into my comfort zone, playing music and dancing me while I was making the VR.
Cool.
So for me, it was already like in my zone. I was already like in my mood and making everything really happen. And yeah, this project actually is, let's say, an ultimate helmet challenge design. So it was kind of the theme. We were totally free to choose our own design, our own concept. And I always like to do crazy stuff, like not conventional, kind of futuristic. So I kind of create this modular headset for a racing concept, because for me, it's like the part where you can actually see the emotions in a much more clear and much more easy way to actually race and all this stuff.
So I'm just going to toss something up really quick in terms of like what we're seeing. So you're talking about the actual helmet that you built. Why a helmet, if you don't mind me asking? I'm sure everyone is curious.
Just like kind of the concept we have to make, like the object we have to build, like kind of the challenge. And it was interesting because we were using helmets to build a helmet in a way. So it was also kind of thinking how we want to experience also the VR in the future. So it was a much more product orientation, but yeah, it was kind of taking the excuse we were making everything in a helmet per se to think about how actually the experience will be in 10, 15, or 20 years and so on in different contexts, and how this actually influence our daily life. So yeah, I think that was the reason actually.
Oh, that's so cool. And it's really interesting because we're sharing the screenshots of some of the modeler programs that you're in and how you actually have your helmet sketch. Do you mind walking us a little bit through like your own workflow on like how do you see something in your mind and then how does that eventually become like an actual 3D object that you have in either VR or just like in your computer space?
So it's in this part is kind of interesting because I have not found, let's say, a proper workflow. I'm kind of getting into it, because it's really hard. I mean, there is a lot of softwares, ways of actually making your design come alive, and I'm kind of right now choosing the ones that actually suit for me with this VR and also with this experience. But for sure, I can say at the start is always making a sketch. It can be digital, but for me, I like always to make it physical because I like to have it in my hands and see like, okay, this is cool. So I always kind of make these sketches at the start, or not making anything like super nice, but only for making the idea actually come and make sense. And from there, right now, I jump right away into Gravity Sketch. That is my main tool right now for making, let's say, this exploration, because it's really easy, really fast. And I was making this kind of wireframe structure to actually see if the composition, if the proportion of the helmet actually was working as I was thinking in my mind. And then from this one, I exported this as an FBX or OBJ, I think, and I imported into Modeler, and I use it as a reference of size, proportion to actually build the way of the helmet itself and the volumes and the shapes. Because Modeler is kind of much more a sculpting side than actually building from nowhere, as I don't know, like SolidWorks, for example.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. And so we actually have a question. Do you do anything that involve real-time renders for the products that you create? Just because you're in industrial design, that's somebody, or is what somebody's asking?
In this aspect, for me, it's like the last step. I mean, you could also for sure make a real-time, really beautiful render in the middle if you want to make some stuff, some tests. But for me, that is my last step, and I right now do it in a real engine. The 5.1 is like amazing how realistic can stuff be, and it sells really well. If you want to sell, for example, the whole story, the whole storytelling, you can do it. Or only making really nice renderings, animations is also really work for it. So I always use Unreal Engine for this.
Oh, that's super cool. And so you mentioned that you liked being able to create in that 3D workspace and you liked being able to like see and hold the thing in front of you. Do you mind like elaborating a little bit more on that? Like what about that makes this so powerful to you?
So like in the VR properly, or like the VR itself for me has like three really big points. The first one is, as I said, the way actually of creating stuff 3D, that you see it 3D. So it's kind of, we think 3D, we work 3D. The second stuff is the immersion feeling that you can actually trick your brain to believe in not only the part of seeing, but also from hearing, but adding music. So it make it much more emotional, the experience. And the third part that for me is really interesting is actually the storytelling, building an ecosystem inside of the software, building a storytelling, not only for making the product, but also making like a step-by-step, and people go around it. It's really funny because when I build the stuff and people come, like friends or family come here to visit me, I'm like, yeah, you can try VR, and they tell me what it like, how you feel it, like kind of making them go the next step and like kind of believe this new world of perceiving stuff that doesn't exist. So I kind of always push people that are not, let's say, familiar in a way with this to jump into this
Oh, that's fun.
word of craziness or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, so you're the guy that you've got this brand new tech and this new technology, and you have all of your friends and family. You're like, come see what I actually have been building, and so you're really the pioneer for this, eh?
When the situations happens, I'm like, okay, you want to try it out? I mean, I think it's pretty interesting, so why not? But yeah, I am the one who always kind of make people to see the stuff if they are interested, of course.
That's cool. And so you got to try then Modeler like in its current phase. And so tell me a little bit about what that was like for you. Like, what are your first impressions moving from Gravity Sketch into Modeler? Like, talk to me a little bit about your workflow, especially like with your industrial design brain.
So I had previous experience before going my first time into Modeler, into the desktop options. I had experience with SolidWorks. I really hate it with all my life and soul. I had Rhinoceros. This one was kind of much more interesting because it was much more free. And
Yeah.
then with this modeler, it's much more artistic profile, you know? You are not restricted by measures and making this like the square and the cutout or whatever reason that never works.
Right.
But it's actually like you build the stuff. Of course, you have to know what to build. You are the one in charge of making it look nice at the end. But you kind
Yeah.
of put the volumes and just from there, kind of like in reality, you put the stuff with the sculpt and start to take off volumes and make it look nice. You're like, okay, I make a mistake here, and you again add volumes and then extract. So from this side, it was much more handcrafted elements, you know, that it adds like a lot of much more value to the 3D modeling because it's much more personal in a way.
Yeah.
So when I first went into this, that was my first impression. I was like, okay, this is a totally new way of approaching actually the 3D, let's say, build up of the shape. And
Right.
there were also interesting features, like for example, the paint brush, kind of
Yeah.
painting right away on top of it, having a feeling. It was also really interesting to just by making, let's say, a sketch of colors to already see kind of, let's say, a first render of the shape.
Yeah.
And in this experience, I find a lot of kind of testing stuff, a lot
Yeah.
of bugs and crashes of the software. I was saying, okay, what happens if I do this? Oh, it crashes. Okay. I mean, then if I do it this way, okay, it works, but more or less.
Okay,
So it
that's
was
cool.
really interesting to have this unique way in a way to actually build a 3D from zero.
Yeah. And it sounds like you really thrive on being able to have that level of creative like freedom, hey?
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool to have it because in this case, the software is not the one who restricts in a way, or your knowledge about the software doesn't restrict you to build stuff, but you're the one actually in charge of making everything happen.
Right.
You have to
That's
have clear view, but it will happen if you know how to do it.
yeah. And so we have another question actually. CT wants to know what are Boolean operations and topology work like in Modeler? Like, do you find that you're worrying about that at all, or like, what are your impressions?
I mean, with the tools we had at the moment, we have primitive shapes for making like basic operations, extracting, overlapping. Uh, but as Boolean, we also had, but it was like in a testing phase. I have not tested right now the software actually how is the tools set anymore. But at the moment was like really, let's say, really primitive and basic tools to make everything. But it was cool because with this you were able to create like whatever you want. You could put a square, a cubic, and then make it happen. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that with the feedback we gave in this project, they improved and also added much more tools for this. Actually, there is one that I want to tell. For me, it was totally crazy and new, and it was to swipe in and swipe out of the shapes. I
Oh, okay.
forgot the
Scoping.
specific element, but for me was that for me was totally crazy and new because I didn't use it in a. It was like kind
Yeah.
of layers of the layers
Yeah.
of the object, and I remember with Lawrence we were kind of he was trying of teaching me how to use it, and I was like wait I can't, and like 4 times he was teaching me. I was like okay I think I know how to get it. So I was like 2 hours only testing this swipe into the shape, making some changes, then swipe out to make everything
Yeah.
look like interesting. So that for
Yeah.
me was actually interesting as a tool set, let's say.
Oh, super interesting. Yeah, because I remember from my experience in Modeler and from the community that I've been speaking to as well, scoping is something, scoping in and out, I think is what it's currently called, is a really, like, almost a controversial topic because some people really prefer, like, being able to see their full outline, right? They want to be able
Yeah,
to
me
know
too.
what layers are what. How did you find that? Like, did you prefer it eventually, or was this something that you really like grew into, or was this something that you're still thinking like, you know what, actually I would still prefer an outliner?
I
Just
mean,
curious.
once you understand how it works, it's really easy, it's really natural. And that is the cool stuff. When you, let's say, take the first step of overwhelming interface, new stuff, and you take like your time to actually play and understand the tools. For me, the
Right.
scope in and scope out, that's the proper name,
Yeah.
was actually really natural. So I was like, okay, going inside, change it, going outside, and understand how was the way of actually using it. So I
Yeah.
use it like for making small changes without making everything change at the same time. Because
Yeah.
as you said, it was kind of a sculptural way. So you really wanted to know or to make a precise element to change without making everything also change in the same way. So
Interesting.
I really enjoyed at the end. I was already like really going in like 3 layers and then going out 2 and whatever. But for sure, I understand like for some people and like this controversial way, because in the scope in, you don't know how deep you are in the model, like in the
Yeah.
layers. As you see
Yeah.
in Photoshop, you have groups, the group of the group or whatever. And when
Yeah.
you're scoping out, you're like, okay, I am in the last layer, or should I go one more maybe? No, it works. Okay, so I am in the last layer right now. But
Okay.
once you do it, it's really easy, really natural.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. And so, like, I'm continuing to watch through the slideshow that you presented, and it's really cool to be able to see that you've got like multiple helmets up against each other. And so, are those just all duplicates of each other? Did you use any of the instancing features where you'd be able to like change something and have it tweak on other helmets, or what was your
Yeah, I
process
mean,
like
so for my concept, I mean, this was more like linked to my concept of the helmet, because I wanted to make like kind of a Lego helmet. You have the same neck module for everyone, and then you have different users that were having different needs for the
there?
helmet, like from the upper part. So I have the same module, and then I copied these 3 or 4 times, and then build it each one of differently, like making variations and differently. Also, kind of testing, like let's say the version 1.1 of the technician's helmet, and then I made a copy to see if I was able to make it much more smooth or the shape much more nicer. So
Yeah.
that's why I was having like different variations everywhere of the software
Oh,
at
that's
the end.
cool. Yeah, but it must have been nice to be able to just like see it all in one go too, right? Like you could literally
Yeah,
physically like have it almost in a room of
yeah, for sure.
different concepts.
But it is cool because at the end you can see like all the steps you took like in 6 hours of work. You can say, okay, this one was the 9 a.m. module, and then like 5 p.m. Okay, it was worth to make all the variations and the steps. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And so we have another question for you. Irin wants to know, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, which features do you think that the Adobe Modeler could improve to turn the software better? And this is a really interesting question because you have like so much knowledge around different 3D softwares that you use because you have that kind of a mind. What would you really like to see in Adobe Modeler like in future? And what did you enjoy currently? What do you think like other softwares do better? Talk to me a little bit about that.
So in this sense, it was also really funny because when I was making the, let's say, the review with the guys of Adobe, we were always comparing it with Trying Sketch because it's the one that I knew.
Yeah.
It was correct comparison.
Yeah.
And one of the things was, for example, I think was the sketch tool. I mean, you were for sure able to make volumes, but you were not having like kind of making this dash, for example, like making a dash only to see if the emotion, if the flow, if the feeling was happening. So
Yeah.
that one was of the things that I was kind of sometimes, let's say, missing as a tool that I like use all the time in Gravity Sketch. And also, but I think they already fixed it and making much better. It was kind of the precise control for making the tools feel much more natural when you were handling them. I remember there was like one, it was kind of a, let's say, hairy, like a hair in a way, like more thick in one part and the other one like really small. And you kind of twist it to have different angles and shapes, but it was
Okay.
kind of laggy because it was having like weird turnouts that were like, okay, this is not what I want. But I
Yeah.
think they already improved it. And apart from that, it was also like for the primitives, the option of having like kind of much more, let's say, customized elements from it. But I think again, they already added because the one was like 1 or 2 months, I think even more before actually the launch of Modeler.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, also from my side, actually, I had a lot of issues when I was crashing the software because at the end, I also created a complete ecosystem. So, and
Yeah.
then I was really seeing the limits of how actually the software was able to handle the stuff.
Oh,
So for
cool.
me, I was saying like, okay, maybe the software can be, let's say, much more powerful. I don't know from which part, like software or malware, I don't know, to make it even to sustain a complete ecosystem with really small stuff happening. But yeah, that is
Oh,
really
that's really cool. And we also have another question here around Substance Modeler having a separate rendering engine. That is true. Just to point out, you
crazy.
cannot currently render within Modeler itself.
Yeah.
Stager as one of them. But what do you use for your rendering engines?
But for example, in this aspect, that is one of my discussions that I have all the time when I try to show VR and AI also to other people. And there is the misbelief or the misunderstood that they should be one program for everything, one program for modeling, for sketching, for rendering, for animation. And there is, for example, Blender is kind of making everything happen in the same software. But for me, it's also cool to have the tool you need for that moment and then jumping into the other tool you need for the other aspects. And having, for example, this ecosystem as Adobe is building is really key because you're able to make it happen really smooth. You build it in Modeler, then you export it to, if you want to Painter for making like customized stickers, decals, making more add-ons, and then you export it right away into Stager. And because it is in the same ecosystem, it goes like right away, like quite easy. And it's supported with it, so it's really easy.
All right, and so like that's really excellent, and it's really cool to be able to see like the different renders that you have of your helmet as well. And we actually see in some of these renders that you've built like you have like models of cars, you've got like full auditoriums almost that you've built inside of here. It's so cool to see. But talk me through a little bit about the storytelling aspect that you like to include in Modeler when you're presenting your projects, because for me it's like really fascinating to be able to know that, you know, there's some people that just build their singular object, but for you build an entire ecosystem around you.
So I don't know, for me, it's much more interesting when you connect in an emotional way to the way you're showing your stuff, because at the end you have to sell your product or your design or whatever. Yeah. And when you're making, for example, a helmet, a car, a product design without any context, without any people actually using them, it's kind of, let's say, like a half experience, you know? Because you say, okay, there's a really good helmet, but I need the person actually using it. Or there's a really cool car, but I don't see any background or whatever happening around, you know? So for me, I'm always interested in selling the whole story to actually people believe this exists somewhere around in a parallel universe, I don't know. So for this project, I did only in Modeler because in this case, Stager was not able to sustain all the data when I tried it out.
You're really pushing the limits then.
I was the one crashing all the time the software. So
I love it.
No, but for example, with this project, I built all the ecosystem for telling the story of a modular helmet for 3 different users in the same context. They are making 3 different stuff, even though they are in the same situation physically, they're happening different actions. And so I did like this starting point of a racetrack when we have the spectator on top watching the race with his helmet different from the one inside of the technician putting the wheel inside of the car. Okay. So it's kind of a really easy and fast way of telling and understanding how actually everything works in different parts in the same universe itself.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's really interesting to be able to understand that you really value context then when you're actually doing your presentation. Like you're not just presenting your designs, you're presenting your designs in a way that actually exists in your mind and within like the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, because it is like much more impactful, you know? It's not about making a cool graphic, but it's also like kind of making it like realistic in a way that you say, okay, this stuff, you can see it existing in whatever part of the world because you understand that it's actually happening with different elements interacting with it. So I'm always really kind of, I mean, for example, right now, one of the struggles that I'm having a lot is how to actually share this experience for the people who doesn't have headset or VR access right away. Because of course, when you see it 2D, it's interesting. You say, okay, cool stuff. But when you put the headset, it's a totally like different from the Earth to the moon, I would say, like totally different stuff. That's so I'm trying to think and like to figure out how I can deliver a little bit, just a small part of this emotion of the VR to people who are not with the headset. Right. Because it's really hard once you don't have the VR to actually live it or see it.
So, yeah, but it's amazing too, because if we're looking at your other renders that we do or that we have on file, like it's crazy some of the stuff that you've been able to produce. Like we're looking at the pictures of the car renders that you've done. Speak to me a little bit about like what goes through your head when you're trying to present these things, because even though they are a 2D render, it still has like such a 3D feel to it. Like how are you creating these?
So for me, one of, let's say, my purpose and one of my objectives is even like apart from the concept of the car that I want to make or the project itself, is to do something, of course, I will enjoy, but also something interesting that at least myself I have not seen in the media that I think and I know is crazy, like to see it, but when you say, okay, that is crazy, but it is cool, you know.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
example, when you say, okay, this guy is crazy, I am like, yeah, I'm crazy in that way. I like
I
to do
like it
stuff.
though. I mean, you're creating content that you want to see that you haven't seen yet.
Exactly. That is, and also that I know right now it will not be able to exist because of technology, whatever. But for me, it's really interesting to think of the future that I would like to live in. So for
Yeah.
me, for example, from work hard that I did also for like a couple of years ago, it was this a Volkswagen G100, and it
Mhm.
was kind of this really organic element, kind of a machine who has alive elements inside. And I was like, damn. I mean, when I was thinking of, I was like, this is so cool to think myself actually interacting with it. I was imagining myself actually inside of the car, putting my hand, and then having like this kind of alive elements coming and reacting to myself. We're like, okay, that is something I would love to
Yeah.
experience.
You'll
And I
be our
always
first Tony Stark one day.
So yeah, like my signature is to make it as crazy as possible, interesting, and also, of course, at the end, beautiful to have
Yeah.
impact.
No, that's incredible. And so we love to talk shop here on the show because this is like by 3D creators for 3D creators. Talk to me a little bit about like Gravity Sketch, Modeler, Blender. Tell me about your workflow. Like, what are your what do you see as some of your weaknesses, some of your strengths? Um, Tell me about like
So
how your journey has been.
yeah, so for example, right now I have been a lot into the VR. I
Yeah.
think I already have like a really, let's say, fast workflow in the VR itself for making the ideas and making it actually happen real fast. I have left aside a little bit the illustration and the digital illustration, and I have seen actually when I come back into it, we're like, okay, I have to kind of again push myself to have the level I wanted.
Yeah.
And for the rendering, is kind of an experimenting phase right now with this from Real, because of course I would love to, and I mean I could, but it's not kind of my goal in a way with the VR and like taking advantage is really early access to this technology. I
Yeah.
could make an animation to show it as a video, and that's cool. But I want to test actually how to deliver the experience that I'm living when I'm making the stuff with the Unreal Engine, for example. So I'm making all the time experiments and tests in the VR of Unreal to
Mhm.
have this render final results, but still in VR. So you are
Okay.
having kind of a render real time with ray tracing, whatever the shades, and you see the model not anymore with a single play color, but you see with the all shadows, reflections, fiber carbon
Right.
stickers coming alive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say like softwares specifically, I have used Blender. I use it right now mostly for making abstract visualizations, elements that I would like to add into the movie or to the concept. I don't model in Blender. I only make these kind of cool animations on it. For making my 3D model all the time in Gravity Sketch. And sometimes I jump into Model for making really specific elements that I know I could make really easy Model, and then I export into Painter, and then I
Right.
bring it on into Unreal. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a combination of three softwares: Gravity Sketch, Unreal Engine, and Blender.
That's too funny. Oh man. So you really are like in between. How do you find moving between so many softwares? Because it's not like you're just in the Substance suite. You actually are like moving between. Do you have
Yeah,
a certain workflow around that? Like exporting files, importing? Any tips or tricks for our friends out there who may also be struggling?
I mean, from the Gravity Sketch side, at the start I was having some issues because when I was exporting the model into Blender was really heavy and it was
Yeah.
kind of a lot of crashes.
Yeah.
But the Gravity Sketch team then uploaded a lot of videos of actually how properly to export it for different parts of the software, for Blender, for Alias, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, their videos are the best ones to actually explain this way actually to how to solve it.
Right.
And also from the Unreal Engine, I just see YouTube tutorials to actually know how to fix it. There is no one, let's say, guru totally about everything, but
Yeah.
I just test stuff, and if it doesn't work, I am like, okay, how I can fix this in Unreal Engine 4.26, and someone happens, I was like, okay, this might actually work, and I
Mhm.
test it out. But yeah, I mean, it's really time consuming sometimes to make everything only work in different softwares. But at the end, it's worth it because once you understand how to make it, you can repeat it, and then it will work like really fast and really easily all the way on.
Yeah. And so when we talk about what type of files that you usually are in for industrial design, is it mostly like CAD files? Like, talk to me a little bit about like what the experience is moving those in between, and like how you actually take those file types into your softwares and what that's like. Do you know what I mean by that?
Like the FBX, OBJs, and all this stuff,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
mean? So right now I do the model in Gravity Sketch. I export it as FBX because it has the information of the groups and all this stuff into Blender.
Right.
I fix all the stuff I have to fix in Blender and also add in more details.
Okay.
And then I export again as FBX from Blender to Unreal Engine.
Right. Okay, so it actually does kind of make sense in a way. Like, was that your first try around? Like, was that what you intended to have work and it worked out for you? Or has there been like lots of testing along the way?
It is a lot of, it is still a lot of testing.
Yeah.
But my first try was actually with Modeler when I exported to Painter and then Painter to Stager. It was really smooth, but because it was the same ecosystem of software. So I know it was really optimized and really already smooth all the way to make properly and direct the transference. But once you do it with different softwares, because they have different elements, different, I don't know, configurations, it was much more tricky. But as I have said, testing everything, and you actually find videos really useful in the internet. So I found a way of making it actually also work into the different parts of the process.
Okay, that's really cool. And so, like, is there something like a favorite thing that you have regarding industrial design that you're bringing into your workflow currently? Or like, what are you testing currently? What's new?
So, I mean, I don't know like in which aspect you mean like the industrial design per se.
Yeah.
But for me, I have found a lot of, let's say, inspiration in a way in futuristic industrial design or concept design. I love a lot the concept design. I actually, before starting to study industrial design, because I was drawing all the time and making this cool stuff about characters, I wanted to be a concept artist, like illustration for video games or whatever. But luckily, like really luckily, I came into industrial design, and I understood actually how different contexts of, for example, not only it is like design itself, but also architecture, fashion design. This could actually make you much more inspired and much more sensible to different elements and aesthetics to make it even more interesting than only staying with one field. So I took a lot of inspiration of different designers, of mood boards, of also styles a lot. Of and testing myself how I can actually at the start, of course, let's say replicate the style, but then add in my own taste. That is like the complete part, kind of understanding how this guy did it for having this result, but from there making your own version of it.
Right. Oh, that's super cool. And so you mentioned Substance Painter a couple times already. We also have a comment in the chat saying that people do prefer to work in Substance Painter. How do you feel about Substance Painter just in general? Like, do you find that it really does also make a difference in terms of like how your workflow goes? I know that like we see a lot of these renders. Do those also use Substance Painter, or are you also using other software?
I mean, when for the project, for example, I tested the Substance Painter, and it was really cool to have like different, not only making the opacity layers, stickers, because it was also much more easier, but also adding procedural materials in this software. It was really cool because it was calculated by the UV maps right away, and you didn't do anything. You were like, okay, that was interesting that it happened by accident. But in Blender, you have to actually went to the 3 nodes, making the whole 3 bench work. And then at the end of 1 hour, you have the procedural material. But here is like, once you have, if you build, of course, the right way your model, you will have it right away. You do one button and then it works. Whatever. That is cool.
Surprise! Yeah, you're like, hands off, don't touch it after that.
5 minutes, and they're like, interesting that it happened then. And then you can tweak everything. You can tweak the amount, you can tweak also adding even more, like going more deep, like I'm making this procedural material because they have different layers, become like a gold detail, become a silver detail. adding also like effects or let's say damage of the metal. It was like really easy to once I was already let's say into the workflow, I was like totally making everything customized like exactly the same way I wanted.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's really incredible. And it's also interesting to like listen to you talk about your workflow because you're a person, it sounds like you're a person that you love to try new things, right? And incorporate those new things into your workflow. And so we have the little chart that says like you have your AI to your VR
Yeah.
to your VR visualization, like, and we all know that currently right now AI is actually a really controversial topic. So how do you
Yeah.
incorporate AI into your work currently?
So, for example, from my own position, and this is only my opinion because I know some people are really kind of radical in this sense,
Yeah.
I have always and I will always see tools as tools
Yeah.
because they are, I mean, for example, a lot of people are asking me, yeah, did you know that this AI can replace you because of whatever? Like, no, I mean, come on, it's only a tool. You will, I mean, of course, it's really amazing and really cool. The result is like really fast, but at the end, it's only a tool. It depends, of course, how you use it, with which purpose. It will have different results. But for me, it's only an option that actually could enhance and make my workflow even more powerful. For me, it's an inspiration tool also as Pinterest, as Behance, as Instagram. I can make really cool, like much more customized. So I could have, let's say, this superpower of outside of the box. Because maybe you have thinking the same stuff like for 1 month and you have not been able to sleep, but then you put the script on the mid journey, for example, and it gives you a result you maybe have never thought about. And you're like, okay, that is cool. Actually, I could use this in my project in this way. Of course, not making like a direct translation of it, but like, okay, this feature of this element can actually influence the way I'm going to make the design. So for me, VR, AI, uh, gravity sketch, modeler are always tools only for us to make them actually better
Yeah.
and not the other way, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is actually kind of my workflow that I'm using right now. First, AI as inspiration tool. Let's say I have a second friend, buddy, robot that is helping me to actually make more things even more crazier than now. And then I jump into the VR for making the ideas, creation of the stuff in Gravity Sketch. Then I also use Modeler and Painter for making exploration of the elements to see how cool they can actually see. And then I go into a real engine to make the final visualization, also in VR for not making only animations in 2D.
Oh wow. Yeah. So you've got like this full workflow then.
It took me like 2 years to figure it out.
And now let's share all of your secrets here in an hour. No,
No,
I'm
it's
just
good. I mean, for me, it's always about sharing content, as they have shared with me also the information. So
yeah.
it is there
That's
for
incredible,
everyone.
Felipe. Thank you so much. Like it's actually so refreshing to be able to like speak to someone who is also like so passionate about their workflow and is like able to really open their mind to like using multiple different tools and like really get a sense of like who you are because for you it really seems like you are the artist and then you just happen to have a lot of tools in your belt as opposed
Exactly,
to
exactly.
tying yourself into one thing.
It's like superpowers. You can choose, I don't know, strength. You can choose invisibility, whatever. You can here choose AI for making more crazier stuff. You can choose VR for making much more faster. You can
Yeah.
choose modeler for making even more crazier. So it's kind
Yeah.
of superpowers you can pick or you could not if it's not the way you want to work.
Yeah.
But this is only actually making you better as a creative, as also as a designer.
Yeah, super cool. And so I would also like to talk a little bit about your thesis just in general. I know that you're under NDA in some cases, but I think that it's really cool to like what you can share. We would really love to know like what are you currently up to? Tell us what's like in the future horizons for you.
So right now I have done a lot of stuff really interesting with VR. I
Yeah.
already finished my thesis, but I can't show it yet. Hopefully in the coming weeks or months, I will be
Yeah.
able to share it. But it's like this project was for me the most challenging project I have ever done until now. Not because only of the design itself, but also of these struggles of making VR happening also for the presentation of it, of
Right.
making everything work with animations, with renderings, with gravity sketch, with all the stuff come together and actually making a new way of presenting stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I will hopefully share it in the coming weeks. between, I will just post some interesting stuff about other stuff, like other projects that I have done in my free time, because I have a lot of stuff that I have not finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right. And so we also have some comments in the chat here. We are really, so as Adobe, we really do try to like listen to our creator base. And we do actually have a Discord online. At any point in time that you open Modeler, there is a prompt in which you can actually join the Discord. And so if you have suggestions, you want to like try out the actual tool, you want to see what other people are doing, you're more than welcome to hop there. Or you're welcome to hop into our YouTube as well. We have lots of tutorials, tips and tricks, and also cool stuff that's being done there too. And so, Felipe, we also have a question. Do you also do a speed model, or would you like to do a speed model sometime in the future with us?
I really try. I can say I really try all the time to make speed models, but at the end they became a full project on my own, like by themselves.
Okay.
I said, okay, I like my goal for this weekend, for this Sundays, for making 2 hours, and that's it. Making everything happen 2 hours, more or less. It will be maybe not that refined, but I will make it happen this way. And I start to work. It can be moderate, it can be gravity sketch. But at the end, I was like, okay, I could try this. I was like, this is interesting. No, let's give it 2 more hours. Then it's 4 hours. And I'm like, okay, no, actually, let's give it another day. Then 2 days, I was like, okay, damn, I have to give this 1 month because I really go into, and I found myself making the speed from actually become a full project. And I have like 20 cars like this way that I have saved, that I have not published because of this interesting.
So you're like a true artist then. Like, you know how we always laugh about musical artists that they have these albums that they just have in closets and they're like, no, I can't show anything like that. Yeah, you're the same way, but with your models.
For me, I could make a whole garage of cars sketches that I have done that I told myself I was going to finish, but I have not finished yet. For example, there is one Bugatti concept that I really like it at the moment, like 2 years ago. And then some other stuff happened, other projects came by, and is still nowadays, and I have not finished it, and I already want to change stuff of what I was already making before. So it's really the creative life. Yeah, I mean the really nice and painful creative life.
Yeah, hey, it really is something. It's like you almost sacrifice a portion of yourself, but
it's
great work. And so thank you so much for being able to come on the show today too, and to talk about your workflow and like what you found interesting. Is there any like parting words that you have with us? Like, give us some wisdom on what you've learned and what you would like to see.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, for having me here. It's also a pleasure to share my knowledge. My main, and I will say the only advice that I will tell to everyone, because I know with media it's really, really overwhelming when you see stuff like happening everywhere. Just stick to what you like, to what you do it this way, believe in your design. There's something that my teacher in my university told me, to believe in actually the process you're building. Maybe right now it's not looking nice, but believe it will become something interesting. And always see the softwares, the rendering tools as tools. I mean, only as tools. The AI, the VR, the whatever is only tools, and it is for you, not the other way, So that's why, for example, I don't agree too much with the disclosure or polemic about AI or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it depends.
Oh, that's, and like really cool to be able to see that even in like a controversial setting, there are like tools like inside out AI and also outside that you're able to do to be able to draw that inspiration, because you said you also use Behance and Pinterest too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always cool to see what other people have done to actually say, okay, that is cool. I want to do something as cool as that.
You're just an inspired guy, and that's incredible. Like, I can tell you how much time I spent on Pinterest too. Like, oh man, that's a banana shark. It's like an actual banana. I want to make thanks, right?
It is funny because remember, like half year ago, mostly, when I was going to sleep after working the whole day or seeing some cool stuff, when I was falling asleep, I was even having more ideas of solving what I was having issue at the moment. So I was like at 3 a.m. waking up, turning my light, like, okay, I have to do this because I know the next day I will never forget it. I will for sure forget it, the idea. So I was waking up like two times a night only to make the sketch and then going back to sleep.
Oh no. You're like a Galileo. You just fall asleep, you have to build you like a VR set that you can go to
It's
sleep.
a VR, so like I feel like dreaming about it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, and anybody that wants to keep up with Felipe, we have his Behance. We will also toss in his so that you guys can keep up with him. I think you spend most of your time on Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram. Sometimes I publish stuff in Behance, but yeah, mostly on Instagram. I would say share stuff.
Yeah. If you ever decide one day that you would like to share your garage of all of your unfinished projects, I'm sure that everybody who is watching this stream is very interested.
I will try to show it the best way possible.
Okay. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming on. We definitely can't do this without our lovely viewers who have been asking questions and participating too. Thanks for coming to see Felipe. And Felipe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you later, everybody. Ciao, take care.